Lottie H. Hargrove's Texas History in Rhyme, published 1910 by Broadway Publishing Company. Preface. The muse of history, as Mrs. Pennybacker prophesied, got busy not with a golden pen, however, but with a 6-for-a-nickel lead pencil, and this little volume is the result. By changing the Texas history as adopted by the state from prose to rhyme, the author has endeavored to supply the need of different forms of expression to arouse interest in and fix in the memory the history of our state and country. These rhymes will be desirable as supplementary reading for pupils, and if the truth must be told, a great help to teachers in preparing for examinations. Criticism will be welcome, for it will help to advertise, and if anyone thinks he can make the facts of Texas history into better poetry, he has the full and free permission of the author to try. Mrs. Lottie H. Hargrove. Era 1. Era of Discoveries and Missions, 1685 to 1790. Where the Mississippi River flows into the Gulf so blue, the banner of France was planted in 1682 by La Salle, the brave explorer to his country always true. Louisiana he named it, this strange land in the west, then proudly to France returning, obeying his king's behest. Of the country he discovered he told with eager zest. Pleased were the people to hear him, King Louis permission gave to seek for homes and fortunes beyond the ocean wave. And so La Salle set sail again with men and women brave. But the Spaniards captured their storeship St. Francis and its crew. Beaujeu with La Salle differed, the Gulf route neither knew. But at last in January a low land comes in view. Not by the Mississippi, but the Matagorda Bay, with anchors cast they hoped at last for many a happy day. Beaujeu, obeying orders, with his ship sailed away. La Salle, bold and stout-hearted, fears of the others stilled, and there the Fort St. Louis with hopefulness they build, although they mourn some comrades by Indian arrows killed. Then, for the Mississippi, La Salle the land explored, hoping his fair lost country might be to him restored. To find this and Détente, all hardships were ignored. 3 of his followers were killed, and Moranget is one. By treacherous evil comrades the bloody deed was done. Then by Duhot, La Salle is shot, his brave career is run. In Father Anastase's arms, without one word, he died. Sadly, the father made the grave there on the prairie wide. Alone he buried brave La Salle, a friend in sorrow tried. Détente, iron-handed, waited and watched in vain, till roving Indians told him his friend La Salle was slain. His heart was filled with grieving, the tears fell down like rain. Though on La Salle's brave efforts fair fortune seemed to frown, his memory now is honored in France with just renown. A statue stands in ruin, his deeds with fame to crown. In Spain is great commotion, from Mexico the news comes of a French ship captured, whose captain does not choose to tell his destination nor purpose of his cruise. Since Cortez conquered Mexico, it all was claimed by Spain, but that the French were trying to settle this domain unto the Spanish courting king, this much seemed very plain. So from Monclova, Mexico, the Spanish viceroy sent De Leon and his soldiers, who gladly northward went. To conquer the French colony was their avowed intent. Through wild Comanche hunting grounds the Spanish soldiers passed, through woodlands green, by sparkling streams, over the prairies vast. And after months of searching, the fort was found at last. They only found an empty fort, lonely and desolate. The few courageous colonists had met a cruel fate. In massacre they perished, victims of Indian hate. With saddened heart, De Leon searched through many miles around. In friendly Senese wigwam some French at last he found. To France he kindly sent them, with glad hearts homeward bound. But 2, the murderers of La Salle, and comrades 3, in punishment for that great crime De Leon forced to go, to work as long as life should last in mines of Mexico. At home again, De Leon tells of Texas land so fair. The viceroy soon determines to found a mission there. Again is Fort St. Louis put in De Leon's care. The Spaniards, in their earnest zeal, the broken walls restore. To Mission San Francisco they changed the name it bore, and underneath the Spanish flag sang hymns and praise once more. But now, so far from home supplies, they did not prosper well. With Indians fierce and crafty, they could not safely dwell. The soldiers wronged the Indians too, so the historians tell. So the government decided 'twas best they should not stay. The Indians rejoiced to see the Spaniards go away. To them the prairies now were free, and free the fair blue bay. Years passed, a French ship drifted in 1719 to where by Bay St. Bernard the Texas shores are seen. Well pleased the soldiers landed where fertile banks were green. Of fruit and game and water they find a plenteous store. But when the ship is ready to set her sails once more, Belial and his companions have wandered far from shore. The captain waits and signals, too far the men have strayed, and after hours of waiting, the captain is afraid that Indians have killed them, no longer then delayed. When 2 or 3 days later they found the ship had sailed, Belial and his companions their carelessness bewailed. They wait and watch for rescue till every hope has failed. Along the shore they wandered, for ships they looked in vain. His 4 companions perished, but famished and in pain. Belial, though despairing, still dreams of home again. At last the Indians found him, and thinking him no brave, to an old Indian woman they gave him as a slave, and for his work she gladly now helps his life to save. 20 years had passed away since the Spaniards left the bay, and the Frenchmen came no more to the fort upon the shore. Then the King of France bestowed on shrewd Anthony Crozat all the fertile lands that lay where the Mississippi flowed, down to where the Rio Grande drained the southern Texas land. 1712 the year when Crozat, the financier, planned to make his fortunes grow by the trade with Mexico. But the stringent laws of Spain make it hard for French to gain, and by 1719 many losses he had seen, so his charter he gives back, since of profit there is lack. Now the Spaniards are afraid that too long they have delayed Texas lands to colonize, and that France will win the prize. This proud Spaniards won't endure, so to make their claim secure, missions they decide to build, and from the Franciscan guild monks they bring to pray and preach, and the savage Indians teach. On the way that lies between the fair Sabine's banks of green to the Rio Grande shores, where tropic flowers scent the air, Captain Ramon then they send, on his wisdom they depend. Sites for missions he selects, and their buildings he inspects. Many missions were begun, now destroyed is many a one. But the mission San Jose, lovely though time-worn and gray, by the river waters clear, was begun within the year 1718. Grand and majestic does it stand, just about 4 miles below the city of San Antonio. And in 1731 the Concepcion was begun, 2 miles nearer to the town. On the river looking down, there its old and gray twin towers count the years no more than hours. Dome and gateway legends strange slowly yield to time's sure change. Then, in 1734, on San Saba's river shore, in the county of Menard, built by labor strong and hard, rose San Saba's mission halls. There yet stands the old stone walls. All went well until a mine there was found of silver fine. Reckless miners, bold and strong, did the Indians many a wrong. All the kindness good priests taught to the Indians seemed as naught. Swift revenge for wrongs received was their right as they believed. And when all in sleep were stilled, the white people there they killed. Priests nor women did they spare. Young and old were murdered there. And the horrors of that time were results of white men's crime. There no more were happy days, Nevermore were songs of praise sung within those walls of stone, now by moss and vines o'ergrown. Still in San Antonio stands the famous Alamo. This old mission first was planned and built on the Rio Grande. Then in 1718, at San Pedro Springs 'tis seen. On the Plaza Alamo, battle scars its walls now show. Here in 1744 it was placed to change no more. It was here, as we shall tell, some brave Texas heroes fell. In these missions 'twas designed, church and fort to be combined, Indian subjects thus to gain, loyal to the King of Spain. Faithful were the priests and true to the work they had to do. Brave Comanches, fierce and wild, listened to the priest so mild. Some Apache warriors grim were well pleased with prayer and hymn. But their lives were hard to change to the white man's ways so strange. Though the priests toiled long and late, missions were left desolate. Then a better plan was sought, and some colonists were brought from Canary Islands, where they had learned their creed with care. Catholics whose zeal was great for the laws of church and state. 1714 is the year when may be seen French Commission Saint Denis traveling off the Texas way, guiding many a trader's load down the San Antonio road. Sometimes he with Indians fought, by the Spanish sometimes caught. Many dangers oft he dared, many times his life was spared. Belial, too, he found at last, after weary years had passed. A sweet girl in Mexico sets with love his heart aglow. 'Tis the joy of all his life, for the girl becomes his wife. So went life with Saint Denis, sometimes dull, but often gay. Spanish favor oft he won, Indians too for kindness done. In Louisiana last, after several years had passed, he was given the command of a French fort in the land, that the French do rightly claim, Natchitoches Fort the name. Era 2, Era of the Filibusters, 1790 to 1829. Introduction, Mexico. Now Mexico was weary of Spanish rules and laws. The gentle priest Hidalgo, leader in freedom's cause, failed in the revolution and died as heroes die. Inspired by his example again, some brave men try. Another revolution in 1823. Success is theirs, and Mexico from Spanish rule is free. The Mexicans, in turn, become tyrannical and hard. Texas's petitions for relief they wholly disregard. So Texans fight for liberty and win their righteous cause, and the Lone Star Republic is formed with juster laws. But meanwhile, other things occur that right here should be told, of colonies and settlements and filibusters bold. In 1797, 'twas Philip Nolan came to catch wild Texas mustangs and win a hero's fame. He caught his herds of horses with tribes of friendly Indians, and map of Texas made. The Spaniards grew suspicious, and when he went once more in 1800, 'twas without the permit had before. 150 Spaniards one morning came in sight, and Nolan's little party with them was forced to fight. Nolan was killed. Young Ellis Bean took the dead leader's place and tried to save his comrades from capture and disgrace. Fair were the Spanish promises, but yet more false than fair. By them this company of men was caught in deadly snare, and only one, 'twas Ellis Bean, was afterwards released. The other prisoners were kept until their lives had ceased. They toiled in mines and prisons, hoping to have at last the freedom Bean alone obtained after 10 years had passed. The French, to keep the English from getting all her lands, transferred Louisiana for cash to Spanish hands. In 1803, Spain secretly gave back Louisiana unto France. Just then there was a lack of money in Napoleon's purse, so he this region sold for $15 million of Uncle Sam's bright gold. But this made Spain so angry it almost caused a fight, for the United States then claimed Texas as hers by right. But war was then averted, neutral they made the ground, between Arroyo Hondo and Sabine rivers found. Here a lieutenant, young McGee, commissioned by the States to guard those crossing neutral ground, hears many warm debates by Mexican Republicans in exile, and he longs to free the land from Spanish rule and right the country's wrong. So his commission he resigns, and with Gutierrez to lead, they organize a company, then to Texas they proceed. At Goliad they take the fort, but are besieged again by troops of Spanish soldiers, Salcedo and his men. 3 weeks McGee's force held the fort, and then a truce declared, that they might be for battle more thoroughly prepared. And while they rest, Salcedo, with crafty shrewd design, in courtesy invites McGee to visit him and dine. McGee, in honor as a guest, listens without a fear to wily Spanish promises so smooth and fair to hear. Salcedo says the Americans are lost if they begin a conflict with his soldiers. No battle will they win. To get McGee's surrender, Salcedo now agrees to send the Army of the North safe homeward, if they please. McGee consents, and at the fort has all the troops parade, but at the word surrender, they all are much dismayed. Only a few will shoulder arms to show that this they choose, and most strike guns upon the ground and say that they refuse. A moment's painful silence, McGee then turned and went, without a word reproving, slowly into his tent. Soon from Salcedo came a note asking the reason why the fort was not surrendered. They sent him no reply. Enraged at this, the Spaniards make a violent attack. Nobly the brave Americans rally and drive them back. Alas, the leader, young McGee, so fearless once and brave, held in consumption's fatal grasp. No power on earth could save. Forgiving the surrender that sorely hurt their pride, his comrades felt deep sorrow when, late that night, he died. The siege is then abandoned, and to San Antonio, Salcedo with his soldiers is soon compelled to go. Kemper, by the Americans, is chosen leader now. They number but 1,000, and yet they firmly vow to overcome 2,000 and make the Spanish yield. The Spaniards at Rosillas are driven from the field. Then daring Samuel Kemper, the leader of the band, for Salcedo's full surrender sends in his stern demand. City and soldiers yielded, and officers as well, but Gutierrez now formed a plot most infamous to tell. The captive Spanish officers it is deemed wise to send to New Orleans, there to remain until the war shall end. So with a guard of Mexicans toward the coast they start. Soon is an order given that shocks the stoutest heart. They're told they must prepare for death. Securely they were tied. The guards by orders cut their throats, and so those prisoners died. Shame, shame to Gutierrez. 'Twas done at his command. To give Delgado his revenge, he said, the deed was planned. Some of the true Americans, all honor to each one, now left, for they would have no part in deeds so meanly done. Again Americans have met the Spaniards on the field. Again they are the conquerors. Again the Spanish yield. In 1813, on a June morning bright, at the Battle of the Alazan, Perry's forces put to flight the troops of Elizondo, of whom 400 dead and wounded were left on the field, from which the others fled. But Gutierrez is faithless, to trust in him reposed. Then the Americans decided that he must be deposed, and so they make Toledo commander in his stead. But this among the Mexicans to much displeasure led. When General Arredondo heard of his men's retreat, he said that the Americans should suffer worse defeat. At the Battle of Medina he took them in a snare, although they fought most bravely, but few the Spaniards spare. Of those 850 who saw that morning's sun, there were but 93 alive when that dread day was done. 'Tis strange that men should count their lives of such a little worth. 'Tis sad such battle should be fought upon this fair green earth. The Republican cause in Texas suffers much from this defeat. Spanish soldiers through the country cruel death to many meet. Many fled to Louisiana, for their homes in ruin lay. Still some patriots kept on hoping there would come a brighter day. And in 1816, love of freedom had not failed. To the Isle of Galveston then Herrera dauntless sailed, with his friend Louis d'Aury, People then were not surprised that a miniature republic was by these men organized, claimed the right of government, and let all the people know that they still would try to get liberty for Mexico. President of this republic was Herrera, brave, discreet, Ari, governor of Texas and commander of their fleet. Mina, too, a Spanish warrior, hither came, and Colonel Perry, with some companies of men, daring, though to rule contrary. For a time they sailed the seas, Spanish commerce they destroyed. Many prizes won with ease, but not long was then enjoyed. Herrera was needed then in affairs in New Orleans. Government at Galveston soon found out what trouble means. Ships of the United States by these men were wrongly seized. Some brought slaves, defying law, getting money as they pleased. And the leaders disagreed, so to leave they all decide. All their buildings then they burned, so no one might there abide. Ari went to Florida, Mina joined in Mexican strife. Perry died at Goliad, with his own hand took his life. No good permanent results come from such bold lawless deeds. Wrong may flourish for a while, right alone at last succeeds. Here is another story that history has told of John Lafitte, the Frenchman, smuggler and pirate bold. He lived a while at New Orleans, plying the blacksmith's trade. That work to hide the smuggling a safe pretext was made. In 1814, Lafitte a bribe declined that was offered by the British, for he had no traitor's mind, and with the best Americans at New Orleans, 'tis true, for his adopted country he fought as patriots do. So his misdeeds were pardoned, but when the war was o'er, the life of an adventurer attracted him once more. A while he lived at Galveston, and many joined him there. They made a little empire upon that island fair. Against the Spanish commerce a pirates' war they raged, some for revenge and some for gold in this bad work engaged. But for all lawlessness at last some punishment awaits. They're forced to leave their rendezvous by the United States. In 1819, United States agreed to give up claims to Texas if Spain in turn would cede to it the right to Florida. This was the bargain made, and on both sides considered a fair and legal trade. But some were much offended. They said it was not right, and for the claim to Texas they were prepared to fight. Another expedition, another daring scheme. From Mississippi, Dr. Long went with the same old dream. The dream of making Texas free from Mexico and Spain, deceived by Spanish treachery. No conquests did he gain. A while he was a prisoner, then in Mexico released. He was shot by one unknown, and thus his efforts ceased. His coming at Point Bolivar, his wife and child await. At last some passing travelers tell of her husband's fate. Though stricken by this woeful news, she lives at last to see the long-sought wish accomplished. Texas at last is free. So fared the filibusters, ill-fated every one, yet partly by their efforts were better things begun. For those who to their homes return in glowing words would tell of Texas soil and climate and how it pleased them well. Era 3, Era of Colonization, 1820 to 1830. In Moses Austin's pleasant home, some stopped a while to rest. There many a worn-out fugitive became a welcome guest. To go to San Antonio then, wisely Austin planned, for a right to give some colonists good homes on Texas land. But Martinez, the governor, the grant of land refused, and Austin, with suspicion, at first was coldly used. But thanks to Baron Bastrop, a friend in time of need, the governor at last approved, and to the grant agreed. So Austin hopefully at last the long way homeward went, but when he reached Missouri, his life was almost spent. But just before his death came papers duly signed by General Arredondo, Austin was pleased to find that all was like he wanted, for he had done his best. Now he asked that Stephen Austin, his son, should do the rest. So Stephen Austin took the work his father had begun. To bring 300 families was the first thing to be done. A fertile land was just beyond the San Antonio road, where the rivers of La Vaca and San Jacinto flowed. 'Twas just between those rivers that Austin chose his land, one of the loveliest regions in all this state so grand. 640 acres for each single man was plenty. If married, then was added to this 320, 160 for each child, and 80 for each slave, were the divisions of the land which Stephen Austin gave. For any public buildings, a factory or mill, that was of benefit to all, more land was given still. To merchants and mechanics were given lots desired, and for 6 years no taxes from any were required. The government of Mexico all promised to obey, and also to be Catholics, though but in name, they say. Soon many men were ready to go with Austin there, with prospect of good fortune, for dangers they'd no care. Though sometimes there was trouble, though some the Indians fear, the colony was prospered and larger grew each year. Martin de Leon also asked a colony to found, though several times he was refused. At last he won his ground. In 1825, 41 families came, and by the river Guadalupe some fertile lands they claim. In 1829, to lands on the Gulf shore, De Leon was allowed to bring 150 more. As Guadalupe Victoria the capital is known, and by this prosperous colony much industry is shown. S.F. Austin and De Leon pleased the officers so well that they wish for more such people on the Texas lands to dwell. Green DeWitt from far Missouri also received command to bring 400 families southwest of Austin's land. They settled at Gonzales, but the Indians troubled so, to the river Colorado these settlers had to go. Kerr moved them to La Vaca, but when DeWitt arrived, they moved back to Gonzales and ever since have thrived. Then Hayden Edwards took a grant, much farther north, between where Sabine rivers and Navasota flow. But he such unjust treatment from Mexicans received that he and all his colonists were forced at last to leave. And this ill-treated colony themselves Fredonians named, and Mexican injustice was everywhere proclaimed. Era 4, Era of Revolution, 1830 to 1836. In 1824, Texas was much dismayed to be with Coahuila joined, yet no ill will displayed. For colonists were welcomed, and lands were given free, till in 1830 Bustamante made a decree that settlers from the United States should be allowed no more to make their homes in Texas as had been done before. And then in 1833, by Mexico 'twas planned for colonies of convicts to be on Texas land, and to collect the taxes were troops of soldiers sent. On making Texans trouble they seemed to be intent. Right here it might be stated, to give all fairness due, some would not pay just taxes, and smuggled goods in too. The laws against the Texans to Bradburn gave delight. All ports but Anahuac he closed, regardless of their right. 'Twas by such deeds of tyranny Texans became offended. At last they rose in anger, and some injustice ended. This last they could not suffer, so a demand they made, that one port should be opened and should not be delayed. Then under military rule, Bradburn the coast declared, 17 were taken prisoners, as criminals they fared. Their comrades on the Trinity took arms their friends to aid. Of Captain Bradburn's soldiers, 20 were prisoners made. Bradburn agrees then to exchange, but when our men accept and go to the Fort Anahuac, he still the prisoners kept, and fired on the commissioners who went to bring them back. The Texans without cannon the fort could not attack, but there at Turtle Bayou, earnest indignant men declared for Santa Anna, who seemed a patriot then. John Austin went for cannon to Brazoria with his men. Ugartequea then refused to let them pass again. So they fired on Fort Velasco. Ugartequea tried most bravely to defend it, but his guns they defied. The Mexicans surrendered, and then the Texans learned that peace was made at Anahuac, so they to homes returned. For Colonel Piedras, far more just than Captain Bradburn, came, and found that for the trouble the captain was to blame. Bradburn from office was removed, the Americans were freed, the colonists to hasten home were very glad indeed. Now Santa Anna boasted he'd die in freedom's cause, and free the Texas people from Bustamante's laws. On the first day of October, 1832, at San Felipe de Austin, some patriots, true, met in their first convention to ask redress for wrongs, and make petition for the right that to each man belongs. They said, "To Santa Anna we've faithful been each one. Now we will ask him for our rights. He will have justice done." But Santa Anna coolly to their wants gave no heed, except to say that Texas close watching seemed to need. And then with Bustamante he made a compromise in the December of this year that caused his friends surprise. In April 1833, again the Texans met at San Felipe de Austin, some juster laws to get, to be free from Coahuila, once more made separate, and with their officers and laws to be a single state. With a memorial all alone, brave Stephen Austin went to Mexico and hoped to get the president's consent. In Mexico, strife and disease were causing much distraction, and Austin from the government got little satisfaction, but was instead imprisoned more than one weary year, and though he asked for trial, no one his cause would hear. The Texas troubles still increased. 'Twas Santa Anna's scheme to be named as the dictator and make his power supreme. He tried to govern Texas in 1835 by strictest military rule, but this plan did not thrive. Quite gloomy was the outlook in this eventful year. From treacherous Santa Anna, Texans had much fear. But still they were not hopeless. Austin, released at last, returned to aid the colonies when war clouds gathered fast. To help in getting justice and safety to provide, committees were appointed, some matters to decide. At Anahuac and elsewhere, disputes and strife arose. The patriot days of Allah found Mexicans were foes. Now General Coase with soldiers was sent to make it plain that Texans should be punished who tried their rights to gain. A skirmish at Gonzales announced war was begun. The Texans, under Colonel Moore, an easy victory won. So now in eastern Texas, Sam Houston was elected to be commander of the troops and keep their homes protected. And Austin at Gonzales was the commander made, while De Zavala came to give the patriots his aid. Their capture next of Goliad made hearts with gladness beat. In the Battle of Concepcion, their victory was complete. Again at San Felipe, they met for consultation, not claiming independence, but righteous arbitration. And Wharton, Archer, Austin were sent to make appeal to the United States for aid, and Texas's wrongs reveal. Pleased with the sense and courage the people all displayed, two companies from New Orleans by nothing were delayed, but came at once to Texas to help the cause along, and greatly cheered the Texans with courage true and strong. The troops chose Edward Burleson to lead in Austin's place, the foe in San Antonio, they're eager now to face. But General Burleson delayed, said troops would be dismissed December 4th, but this command the army did resist. Then finding, too, that General Coase was ignorant of his plan, he granted to Ben Milam, a brave and fearless man, to lead the army onward to San Antonio. With cheer on cheer they follow, some storm the Alamo. While Milam with his company entered the city's street, from house to house they struggled, and never made retreat. And thus the bloody conflict raged fiercely 5 days and nights. The Mexicans in terror fled from the fearful sights. A flag of truce December 9th by General Coase was raised. The Mexicans surrendered, and Texans should be praised. Their treatment of the prisoners was generous and kind. Well had it been if Mexicans had kept these things in mind. All officers with General Coase were free allowed to go, if they against Americans would not help Mexico. The other prisoners could go or stay as they desired. To fight no more against Texas was all that was required. 150 Mexicans died in this bloody fray, and only 2 Americans, but great was the dismay to lose their brave Ben Milam, one of those 2 who fell. They gave their lives most bravely, serving their country well. Now from the hostile Mexicans, Texans rejoiced to be relieved at last, and hoped to have a land entirely free. The Texas soldiers are dismissed. They thought the war was through, but just to guard the city, they left a very few. When news of this surrender was to Santa Anna told, he swore to punish Texans for such behavior bold. So now, in 1836, the war clouds gather dark. The soldiers at the Alamo are Santa Anna's mark. He thought with his great army to punish each and all. On those at San Antonio, his vengeance first should fall. On February 23rd, this band of heroes brave withdrew into the Alamo and sent for help to save. In vain they send the message, their call was heard too late. A small band from Gonzales came to share their comrades' fate. Just 32 brave spirits on March 1st came to cheer the garrison with courage, but now the worst was near. For Santa Anna's army numbers 6,000 men. All hope they yield of seeing kindred or homes again. On March 6th, the attack is made after the midnight hour, for Santa Anna thus decrees, Texans shall feel his power. The Mexicans plant ladders to scale the fort's high walls. Under the fire of Texas guns, the men by hundreds fall. But o'er their fallen comrades the Mexicans are driven by swords of mounted cavalry, no chance for turning given. And thousands face the 185 who stand ready to die like heroes, a faithful, fearless band. There Travis fell, and Bonham, Crockett, and Bowie died, and all their comrades brave as they fell fighting side by side. A bitter wail of sorrow swept over Texas then. Woe, woe to Santa Anna for murder of brave men. Fierce was the fight, but proudly upon our history's page the story of the Alamo is told from age to age. And as their bodies were consumed in one great funeral pyre, the country rose to vengeance and freedom in that fire. At Austin now a monument of granite stands to show the names of those true heroes killed at the Alamo. From deeds of war and carnage we must now turn to view the governor and council and what they tried to do. More men for war were needed, more money men to pay. The council and the governor could not agree, they say. This caused to General Houston much trouble and delay the execution of the plans he for the army made. Also throughout the winter, the wives and children need their husbands and their fathers' care. For them at home they plead. One little gleam of sunshine brings hope to every heart, a loan from the United States who takes the Texans' part. Then comes March 1st, the noted day when the convention met, and next March 2nd is the date Texans will not forget. For free and independent, Texas was then declared, and for a new republic the plans were then prepared. Burnet was chosen president, Zavala, patriot true, was chosen as vice president, to him an honor due. Sam Houston for the army in chief command they place, under his care the soldiers shall never know disgrace. And to recruit the army it was by law decreed that able-bodied citizens should serve if there was need. Not younger, though, than 17, nor more than 50 years, should any in the army be, as by their rule appears. Now Burnet moved state papers to Harrisburg and then to Galveston to keep them from Santa Anna's men. For throughout all the country was terror and affright, looking for Santa Anna to come by day and night. General Urrea also came from Mexico to take the Texas towns along the coast and many prisoners make. One scheme, the Matamoros plan, abandoned, it is true, still led to some disasters, as such schemes always do. While Fannin, Grant, and Johnson go forth for an attack, Johnson and Grant hear Fannin of horses has a lack. So Grant towards the Rio Grande with his men went and brought some prisoners and horses back, and this time was not caught. Then Grant and Johnson also made for horses made a raid Johnson returned, but Grant more bold, too long return delayed. For by Uriah's men attacked, Grant and his men are slain. Though Grant and Brown gallop for life, their race is all in vain. For Grant is killed, and Brown is made a prisoner, but fair Senora Alvarez so pleads that now his life they spare. Then San Patricio captured, most of the men are killed, but Johnson and a few escape, for Providence so willed. The people at Refugio to Fannin sent for aid, to protect them from Uriah, of whom they are afraid. So Captain King is sent to them, with 27 men. He safely reached Refugio, and started back again. By the Mexicans appearing, he to the mission went, and 4 more troops to help him at once to Fannin sent. 150 men, with Colonel Ward make haste. They reach Refugio indeed, but here much time they waste, debating who shall take command. King and his men leave first, and by the enemy are slain, but this is not the worst. Ward well at first the fort defends, but ammunition fails. He leaves the church, and Mexicans his little band assails, and trusting to Uriah, they surrender. But too late, they find Uriah cannot save them from a martyr's fate. Then Houston sends to Fannin Goliad at once to leave, but of Colonel Ward and King no news Fannin did receive. At last he starts. They march 9 miles, and then they stop to rest, not far from the Colito. Some did not think it best, and in an hour the Mexicans were there on every side. The Texans now could not retreat. To fight they bravely tried. Almost they won, when darkness made the dread slaughter cease. But for the suffering Texans the night time brought no peace. With no water for the cannon or for the wounded men, they saw Uriah reinforced when morning came again. There was no way but surrender. The white flag was displayed. Colonel Fannin and Uriah terms of surrender made. The promises were written fair, but broken in a day. None thought that Santa Anna such baseness could display. To Goliad the Texans were sent, and Colonel Ward was brought a prisoner with his men, all under a strong guard. March 26th, Palm Sunday, the men were formed in line, marched half a mile, and then, by devilish design, were halted, shot down like beasts, defenseless and unarmed. A few ran madly for their lives, and so escaped unharmed. The officers the same fate shared, the wounded murdered too. 'Twas Santa Anna ordered his men such deeds to do. Some officers conceal a few, and Senora Alvarez is kind to all the Texans, and saves many a one from death. When the massacre is over, the dead are rudely piled, with brush and set on fire, and yet the sunshine smiled. The world heard of this horror, and censured act and thought, while Santa Anna made excuse for deeds so evil wrought. The Congress of the Mexicans, he said, had long declared that of all foreigners with guns no lives should now be spared. His words were but a mockery, as all his deeds have shown. If there had been a law like that, Uriah would have known. Santa Anna now believes his work in Texas done. The Alamo and Goliad have been great victories won. His officers protest there is much more for him to do. Texans their cause will not desert, they say. 'Tis surely true. At Alamo and Goliad many were from the states, and vengeance to the Mexicans for deeds so base awaits. So these officers persuade Santa Anna to decide to stay a while in Texas and his army to divide. He arranges 5 divisions so he can quickly make himself master of all Texas, and towns and hamlets take. When Houston went from Washington to Gonzales in command of Texas troops collected there was terror in the land. From Santa Anna's forces, Houston's retreat was wise. To make his army larger and better drilled he tries. People were going eastward. President Burnett tried in vain, issuing a proclamation to get them to remain. And men would leave the army, their families to see, though Houston said not that way could they make Texas free. And Houston kept on working with a brave and steadfast heart, while Captain Cards and Deaf Smith most nobly did their part. At Harrisburg were numbered 800 soldiers true. These showed the waiting people what could be done by few. Now Santa Anna's army, starting to devastate Natchitoches, turns aside to Harrisburg too late to capture President Burnett and officials, so he burns the town, and to New Washington quite boastfully returns. Hear now good news for Houston. Some captives to him brought on the 18th of April tell him the news he sought, that Santa Anna comes himself with soldiers in advance, divided from the others, and now was Houston's chance. He stops retreat, turns in pursuit, and stops at Lynchburg near, where San Jacinto's waters flow outward, fresh and clear. A camping place he then selects, Twin Sisters placing near, stations his men, and waits to see the enemy appear. And truly they are close at hand, but skirmishes are all till Santa Anna goes to camp, as shades of evening fall. And so they wait the dawning. Too long seem hours of night, till the 21st of April dawns on them clear and bright. 500 came with General Coast to Santa Anna's side. There they piled up a breastwork, and all attack defied. The bridge at Vince's Bayou Deaf Smith did then destroy. To stop the Mexicans' retreat would give him real joy. At 3 o'clock the Texans were ordered on parade, and General Houston told them they must not be dismayed. Though Santa Anna's army numbered twice as many more, the 700 Texans should fight as ne'er before. They should think of murdered comrades, think of children, home, and wife, and with a purpose true and righteous, they would conquer in the strife. Gladly did they hear the order. Hearts rejoiced, though lips were dumb, as they formed their lines in silence, without sound of fife or drum. The Mexicans piled saddles and baggage sacks in front, with brushwood on the left and right, to meet the battle's brunt. There the Mexicans were resting on that April afternoon, but they hastened to make ready when they heard their martial tune. And the Texas force came dashing, shouting out the fearful call, "Now the Alamo remember, Goliad remember, all." Oh, the Texans did remember how those dreadful deeds were done, then like demons fought for vengeance, and in 20 minutes won. While the Mexicans were running, seeking safety in retreat, "Me no Alamo," they pleaded, falling at their victor's feet. "Me no Goliad," not always did the cries the pleaders save. Others, plunging in the bayou, found at last a watery grave. For Deaf Smith and his companions, Vince's bridge had well cut down. No retreat was for the conquered. They must either yield or drown. When at last the fighting ended and the cries of war were stilled, 730 prisoners and 230 killed. The full number of the wounded was 208 more, and $12,000 taken, weapons, horses, mules galore. Of the Texans killed while fighting, history tells there were but 2. Of the 23 then wounded, 6 in death they sadly rue. But for April 22nd we should give a hearty cheer, for they captured Santa Anna hiding in the forest near. And they brought him to see Houston, lying wounded neath a tree. Houston treated him politely, as a president should be. Rusk and Houston made no treaty. To armistice they agreed. His orders the dictator sent for Filisola's heed. The Mexicans should all withdraw to San Antonio and to Victoria, and await commands that all should know. Then President Burnett came in haste to General Houston's side. With them the cabinet consult, but cannot soon decide. What kind of treaty should they make? For some did boldly say, for Santa Anna's cruel deeds his life alone should pay. Therefore they went to Galveston, Houston to New Orleans. Then President Burnett's cabinet at Velasco soon convenes, and there they made a treaty that all the world admired, and Texas won the honors that she so much desired. According to this treaty, President Burnett tries to send Santa Anna to his country and does assistance lend. But the people and the soldiers say that way should not be. 'Tis too good for the dictator, and they will not set him free. But after months of hardship, as a prisoner here and there, When Houston is the president of Texas Republic Fair, to Jackson, then the president of the United States, he sends poor Santa Anna, and all his woes relates. So Jackson says in mercy, Santa Anna shall not roam as exile any longer, therefore he sends him home. Thus at last the war is over, Texas is surely free, but still there are some troubles, such things will always be. Commissioners by Burnet in May were quickly sent to ask for annexation to the U.S. government. But when to Washington they came, the Congress had adjourned, so for advice to Jackson, with confidence they turned. And Jackson sent down Moffett to look at Texas well. If it deserves to be a state, he better then can tell. Now to their farms and families some men are free to go, but others watch for Mexicans who still might work them woe. When Filisola's army had crossed the Rio Grande, words of relief and thankfulness were heard throughout the land. And thanks to the Texas Navy for doing its very best, in any time of danger, those 4 ships stood the test. General Rusk in Houston's place commander-in-chief was made. He followed Mexicans to sea, the treaty was obeyed. And on June 3rd at Goliad, the Texans camped once more, nearby where Fannin and his men were massacred before. The soldiers gathered the remains of those dead heroes true, and sadly give them burial with all the honors due. And the Lone Star Republic at last, thank God, is free, the land and home of honest hearts, may it forever be. Era 5, Era of the Republic, 1836 to 1846. A temporary office the presidents had been, till their full independence the Texas people win. So in September of this year, they all are called to vote on questions of the government, 7 of which we note. First, that of annexation to the United States. Second, the Constitution for their adoption waits. And thirdly, the first Congress should not have any right to change the Constitution, which the people think is right. Then fourthly, for their president, Sam Houston they elect. Lamar for the vice president wins everyone's respect. The first term of the president should only last 2 years, but after that it should be 3, as by their law appears. They vote for 14 senators. Now there are many more. The chosen representatives numbered just 24. The senators should serve 3 years. To representatives, a term of only 1 short year the Constitution gives. At Columbia, the capital, the first Texas Congress met. October 3rd, they went to work. That was the time they'd set. On October 22nd was the inauguration of Sam Houston and Lamar with public demonstration. And for the new republic, Congress chose a flag and seal. On the seal within a wreath, a star shines for Texas zeal. After nearly 3 months' work, Congress adjourned to meet in May 1837. Not long, for time is fleet. Houston is then the capital. Soon after it is changed to Austin in the wilderness, as wisely 'twas arranged. On the 15th of November, de Zavala breathed his last. He had been a faithful friend to Texas in years past. Stephen F. Austin, Houston chose as Secretary of State, a most wise choice, for Austin was a man both good and great. But without comforts, even fire, to do his work he tried. And on December 27th, from pneumonia, he died. At Peach Point, with great honors, they placed him in the tomb. The death of these 2 patriots cast o'er all hearts a gloom. Some state affairs of Texas were hard for the new nation. Congress in Houston managed them with wise deliberation. $1.25 million of debt that should be paid, and Mexico still threatened the Republic to invade. The navy of the Mexicans our commerce would destroy. The Texas Army was not paid and left without employ. The Indians were troublesome, by Mexicans incited to acts of savage treachery, in which they all delighted. Some debts were paid in scrip for land, and notes were issued too, to pay the tax and other debts whenever they were due. And Mexico had troubles at home they did not cease. It happened so that for a while Texas was left in peace. Then Houston granted furloughs, and soldiers could be free to go to work and with their friends and families to be. Judicial laws and methods like the United States Texas Congress now adopted. This needed no debates. Then Hunt and Wharton both were sent with an approved commission to ask of the United States a public recognition of Texas independence, a new republic free. Congress of the United States to do this does agree. Then for admittance as a state, they asked the stronger nation. United States said, wait a while, we don't want annexation. September 1838, new officers they choose. Lamar is elected president, and he does not refuse. And David G. Burnett they call to be vice president. These tried to do their duty with very best intent. Then France in 1839 gave the right recognition to Texas as republic in answer to petition. And England, Holland, Belgium gave Texas welcome hearty to join with other nations and make a friendly party. To Texas as state minister, France sent de Cellini. A pig caused him much trouble, too much as all can see. Lamar was hard on Indians, said force alone was best. The Indians, urged by Mexicans, let Texas have no rest. The Texas Rangers organized with Burleson to lead. The Indian chieftain Bowles they killed, his tribes no more succeed. Broken the strength and spirit of these noble Cherokees, the Texans drive them northward, the Indians' land they seize. March 19th, 1840, Comanche chiefs are slain, and deeds like this will always bring trouble in their train. Comanches vowed dire vengeance, right well their vow they kept. The settlers were in terror, whether they waked or slept. At last, on the 11th of August, on Plum Creek, the Indians were defeated. A while for peace they seek. By General Felix Houston and Edward Burleson, the Texas leaders in this fight, this victory was won. And now in Mexico we find another revolution. The Federals and Centralists fight o'er their constitution. General Canales, Federal, asks Texas to join him. The Texas government says no, but some, with reckless vim, 180 do enlist under Canales' banner. With Colonel Jordan, Colonel Ross, they go in daring manner. In 1839, to conquer is the word. The Battle of Alcantara, they win October 3rd. 350 prisoners and valuable supplies are taken by Canales, and then he acts not wise, but lets the enemy have time, their forces to collect, and drive him back a foolish way his army to direct. So Ross and 50 others unto their homes return, seeing Canales and his men the best way will not learn. But Colonel Jordan and the rest hoped Canales would succeed, and stayed to help him surely wherever there was need. On the 18th of January, 1840th year, a time of some importance is mentioned to you here. General Canales on this date a daring scheme devised. The Republic of the Rio Grande by him was organized. And when the matter was arranged, they started out once more to fight against the Centralists and win their country o'er. By Jordan and his Texans the Federals were led, 110 in number, but they were too far ahead. 1,000 Centralists appeared, marching in manner bold. Jordan's troop takes refuge in a hacienda old. At the first shot of cannon the Centralists display, Canales Mexicans in fear suddenly run away, and they took the ammunition, leaving Jordan and his band to win a noted victory with no other help at hand. 400 Centralists were killed. It was a battle dread. 7 Texans there were wounded, and 5 lay cold and dead. Then Jordan and his company the hostile country crossed. 300 miles they traveled, and not one life was lost. The Rio Grande Republic was a failure in the end, but it benefited Texas more than Mexicans intend. For this strife gave the Mexicans no time Texas to annoy, and to restless, idle soldiers it gave desired employ. But there were other matters that made Texas' outlook drear. The notes of the new government fell lower every year. Too many officers employed, the salaries too great, no nation would loan money to an insolvent state. $900,000 expenses to be paid, $180,000 was all the income made. Though for a while Texas is not troubled by Mexico, again a band of Texans on an exhibition go. In 1841 they start for Santa Fe, 270 armed men, though not to fight, they say, but to help New Mexico in trade, the country to explore, and on the route to Santa Fe they're joined by 50 more. Like an invading army, to Mexicans they seem, and that to join New Mexico to Texas is their dream. On the long march to Santa Fe, the Texans suffer thirst, hunger and storms and prairie fires. The Indians are the worst. The Indians attack them, and at Santa Fe they find the people are against them, and all of hostile mind. The soldiers of the Mexicans also are close at hand. A Texan proves a traitor, and surrenders all his band. To Salazar, most savage of the Mexicans is he. He marches them to Mexico, no mercy do they see. At last in 1842, their trying tortures cease. Texas and the United States obtain for them release. The people now decided their capital to change from Houston to some other place, as they could well arrange. And in the wilderness at last they chose a lovely site, and named the city Austin, in which they took delight. And wonderful the story of this new place is told. In August 1840, the first town lots were sold. Congress and all the officers were settled in November. 1,500 people the town numbered in December. In spite of many drawbacks, Texas had prospered well. Their cities grew, the crops were good, and many things they sell. Ships came and went to Galveston, steamers on rivers ran. Imports were less, exports were more. Hopeful was every man. Knowing that education is a nation's strong defense, they set aside vast tracts of land to meet the school's expense. In 1839, 3 leagues for every county. In 1840, 1 more league was added to this bounty. And for the university, the nation's greatest pride, in the cause of education, 50 leagues were set aside. To favor annexation, Lamar was not inclined. The grave of Texas greatness 'twould surely be they'd find. But with the press and people of the United States, the subject gains more favor, and the right time awaits. In September 1841, the people vote again. For all official work to do, they want the wisest men. Houston again is honored with place of president. As vice president elected, Edward Burleson's content. Houston seeks with Indians to try more peaceful modes, and trading posts establishes on the wild frontier roads. And then a good example of economy he sets. In all the state's expenses to save money to pay debts, he also said that Texas should not Mexico invade, but let the Mexicans alone if right at home they stayed. But Santa Anna does not wish that Texas should be free, nor yet of the United States that Texas one should be. So San Antonio by a force of Mexicans is taken, but as they fear the Texans, the town is soon forsaken. 3,000 Texans gather, all eager to pursue, but wiser leaders caution, that way will never do. Congress was called by Houston in 1842 to meet at Houston City with a special end in view of raising money to defray the looked-for war's expense, for Mexico seemed anxious to jump the southern fence. To sell 10 million acres, some thought, would be quite wise. Houston said no, 'twould be as well to sell land in the skies. September 1842, with General Wool to lead, 1,200 Mexicans across the Rio Grande proceed. They capture San Antonio, the district court they take, and all the members present their prisoners they make. This second bold invasion sounds plainly war's alarms. Without delay the Texans now madly rush to arms. With Colonel Caldwell goes a troop, 200 mounted men, to rescue San Antonio from Mexicans again. Although with no artillery, the Texans turn not back when they discover General Wool all ready for attack, 6 miles from San Antonio upon a prairie wide. But Colonel Caldwell on a plan right quickly does decide. He sent the famous Captain Hayes to choose a battleground. The east bank of Salado was the best place they found. Here in tall grass and bushes the Texans lay concealed, till on the Mexicans' approach by firing were revealed. 3 times the Mexicans attack, 3 times retreating go, and in the morning General Wool leaves San Antonio, and does not stop until he comes to Mexican domain. He does not care for Texas war, and that is very plain. To join with Colonel Caldwell, 53 men brave and strong, with their leader Colonel Dawson, to the battle rode along. But the Mexicans between them and their comrades tried and true attacked them with artillery, with swords and bayonets too. The Texans raised the white flag, and their enemy was filled with fierce desire for slaughter, and every Texan killed. In 1848, near LaGrange, in a grave, the people buried the remains of this little band so brave. Some Texans still were eager to have another fight to punish Santa Anna, for he had not done right. The troops collect at Bear, intending to invade the country of the Mexicans, but for some weeks delayed. Then General Somerville decides the army should disband. 300 stay, not heeding the general's command. They think with William Fisher as commander they'll not fail, and in some boats embarking, down the Rio Grande they sail. When opposite the town of Mir, they gaily pitch their tents, then crossing march into the town, and an attack commence. The alcalde soon surrenders, the people promise sure to supply the Texas soldiers with food they can procure. The alcalde as a hostage the Texans take and leave, and in their camp they wait 2 days, but no supplies receive. At last some of their scouts bring in a Mexican who tells of General Ampudia, and all their hopes dispels. The coming of Ampudia, with 2,000 men in line, kept the town from sending Texans anything on which to dine. So on December 25th, for battle they prepare. 300 against 2,000 is certain death to dare. At night, with a successful dash, they take part of the town, and in the morning do their best to shoot their foemen down. There, many times the Mexicans come on in fierce attack, and many times the Texans more fiercely drive them back. Again the Mexicans charge on but are repulsed. The sun looks down on hundreds, in the throes of death convulsed. Then, when the Mexicans perceive they are losers in the field, by artful trickery they cause the Texas troops to yield. A white flag to the Texans is sent with words of praise for their courage in the battle, and thus their fear allays. They're told also that many troops are stationed close at hand. 800 more are coming at Ampudia's command. If the Texans do surrender, they will kindly treated be. If they continue fighting, no mercy shall they see. Colonel Fisher had been wounded. He did the terms accept. But when his men gave up their guns, some even the bravest wept. They all should be exchanged, sent home, was what they then were told. But then they were marched to Mexico, through hunger, heat, and cold. February the 11th, at Salado they agreed to try to gain their freedom. 193 succeed. But they left the traveled road of the mountains they had crossed, and among the rocky pathways they were completely lost. Some starving ate their horses, and some lay down to die. For water, food, or freedom they could no longer try. But while in this condition, Colonel Mejia appears. With a company of Mexicans, at first he kindly cheers, but to comply with orders he is compelled to send the prisoners to Mexico, the city to attend. On the 25th of March, 1843, Santa Anna gave an order as heartless as could be. 176 waiting to go home again, he commanded should be shot, 1 man of every 10. All honor to Mejia, such steeds he did not choose, and to direct it merely he firmly does refuse. Santa Anna had no trouble, other helpers to secure. There are some with hearts so evil, they can such things endure. Within a jar were placed some beans, each man could draw but one, and so they drew for life and death under the southern sun. 17 black beans were there, white 159. Those who drew the black beans were shot that night in line. On April 23rd, another died from Santa Anna's hate. 'Twas gallant Captain Cameron, who calmly met his fate. To the fair city, Mexico, weary they come at last. In the fortress of Perote they are imprisoned fast. But hardships sometimes have an end, and do not last forever, and 32 escaped from this by a contrivance clever. In 1844, Santa Anna's cherished wife, in the month of bright September, departed from this life. Santa Anna in his sorrow was very much distressed, and tenderly he listened to his dying wife's request. She asked for all the Texans a speedy full release. This the dictator granted to give his conscience peace. And now we return to Texas to learn what there appears. Some things of much importance have occurred in these 2 years. Congress ordered in December 1842 6 companies of militia, General Rusk, Commander True, and the brave Texas Rangers were more strongly organized. Their help along the frontier was very highly prized. Texas authorities resolved to let the whole world know about the savage treatment received from Mexico. Texas had won her freedom and independence too. This other nations recognized and gave her honor due. But Mexico persisted still in keeping up a fight. Texas hoped the other countries would show her what was right. England and France were much impressed by such a strong appeal. The whole world was against him, they made Santa Anna feel. So on the 15th day of June, 1843, an armistice was granted, to which both sides agree. The murders and invasions by Mexico should cease, and if the war not declared, Texas should be left in peace. All this time for annexation the Texas people plan. They wish to join the Union as quickly as they can. President Tyler favors this, and Andrew Jackson too, but still the Senate seems to think it's not the way to do. But still, in the United States, 1844, in the campaign for president, 'tis talked of more and more. Clay and no Texas on one side was all the battle cry, while Polk in Texas was displayed on many a banner high. Annexation was opposed by England and by France. They would take care of Texas if they had a chance. This would be a violation of the Monroe Doctrine sound. United States would have to keep great armies on her ground. Polk, however, was elected. 'Twas all that was required. Texas should join the Union if the people so desired. From 1842 to 1844, in Shelby County and those parts, there was turmoil and uproar. The regulators on one side, moderators on the other, gave all the steady citizens a great amount of bother. Some had lived in neutral ground, where they no order saw. Jackson of Louisiana was a refugee from law. Here, candidate for congressman, he was defeated quite. His anger roused, some things he did were very far from right. His party, regulators, sought to ruin the government. The moderators fought them with a desperate intent. Outrages, murders grew so bad, a civil war seemed near. 500 state militia caused them a little fear. Also the state officials for better natures stand, and they persuade the parties to quietly disband. In 1842, from Missouri far away, there was a road to Mexico called the Trail of Santa Fe. Along this road through Texas were many journeys made, and merchandise was carried by caravans for trade. In April 1843, the government thought right to capture a rich caravan when it should come in sight. So Colonel Jacob Snively, thinking it was his duty, with 190 men, set out to get some booty. They took some prisoners and goods. This story has a moral. Unfortunate was their success. It only made them quarrel. And led by Captain Chandler, 70 for home depart. It was the best way for them, and shows that they were smart. And the caravan escorted by Captain Philip Cook, with United States dragoons, such troubles could not brook. In June, Cook asked of Snively why he a war was waging on land of the United States, and in robberies engaging. But Colonel Snively told him true, they were on Texas soil. Yet Captain Cook took all their guns, poor pay for all their toil. But Cook offered them safe escort. 50 of them went his way. Others, overtaking Chandler, all got safely home, they say. But afterward, it was declared by the United States that Snively was on Texas soil, and they are paid fair rates. For all the guns that Captain Cook took from the Texas men, $18.50 were paid each one again. To this Snively expedition, nothing happened very bad, but it won the men no honor, and it made nobody glad. Close of 1844, Houston's administration second time left the Republic in a prosperous situation. Finances had much improved, the harvest did not fail, and every heart was hopeful, thinking peace would prevail. Once more the presidents are changed, this time 'tis Anson Jones, who has to please all nations with pleasant words and tones. To Kenneth Anderson the place of vice president is given. For the Republic's welfare faithfully he had striven. For Texas independence, England as well as France tried hard with many promises to show Texas her chance. Yet annexations talked about through all the country wide, and Congress of United States the question must decide. On February 25th, in 1845, the House of Representatives for this bill nobly strive. And when, by 22 good votes, after a wise debate, the ayes 120, the noes were 98, and in the Senate 25 of noes were surely counted, but ayes were in majority, to 27 mounted. President Tyler signs the bill that showed they were agreed. One of his last official acts, 'tis what the people need. Now Mexico makes offers of peace, yes, lasting peace, if Texas now will let the talk of annexation cease. But Texas knows that Mexico such promise may not keep, but still might harm the country with treachery dark and deep. After the Texas Congress and Convention do agree upon the annexation bill, it must submitted be to all the people for their votes. On the 13th of October they do accept with eagerness and in heart's content and sober a constitution for the state. They also do adopt, for Texas as a nation will very soon be stopped. In 1845, the laws you will remember of the United States were given to Texas in December. In 1846, February 19th day, U.S. laws and postal service Texas did then obey. Then Anson Jones, the president, 1 year and 50 days, to Henderson, the governor, resigns his place with praise. Thus the Lone Star Republic is stopped by her own hand, but under the red, white, and blue she shines in statehood grand. Era 6, Era of the State, 1846 to 1908. The sixth era of Texas, the brightest and the last, brings glimpses of the governors like moving pictures past. J.P. Henderson the first held his office for a year. His administration opened with prospects bright and clear. To the Senate of the Union, Houston and Rusk were sent. Representatives Pillsbury and D.S. Kaufman went. When Texas joined the United States, Mexico showed consternation. "Texas still belongs to me," she said in indignation. Her minister at Washington she recalled without delay. With such an unfair country, she would not let him stay. The minister in Mexico from the United States gets no more recognition. Of rude treatment he relates, and Mexico tells Texas. Anyway, the boundary named is the bank of Nueces River. Texas Rio Grande Bank claimed. So General Zachary Taylor went to settle with a force this disputed territory of so much strife the source. He took men to the Rio Grande, and there they built Fort Brown. The Mexicans resist this and try to turn it down. So a war with Mexico United States declared, and many Texas soldiers and all the victories shared. To Lieutenant Governor Horton, Henderson now left his work, while he went with Texas soldiers, his duty not to shirk. For bravery at Monterey, Congress voted him a sword. In all of his achievements, his standard never lowered. The gallant Texas Rangers, led on by Colonel Hayes, with many other Texans won honor and much praise. So Mexico was conquered, And to pay the debt of war, she sold to the United States some land extending far. The Union paid to Mexico $15 million more, also assumed the debt she owed in the United States before. Next, Wood's administration. Now the legislature tried, with court and public buildings the counties to provide. $5.5 million were owed by the new state, and for their pay the creditors no longer liked to wait. But Texas claimed the country surrounding Santa Fe. Governor Wood said, "Take it by force, that is the way." United States authorities said, "Do so if you dare. You'll do it at your peril. You'll find how much we care." Impulsive Texans answered, "Keep our property you may, but from the Union we'll withdraw. With you we will not stay." But Governor Wood wrote a letter to President Polk and showed that wrong was done to Texas and not much good bestowed. On the debt and boundary questions, people now were much divided. By the next administration, these were left to be decided. Then, in Bell's administration, 1849, the Black Year will be remembered. Frost and drought killed crops so fine. From the California region came reports of finding gold, wonderful as fairy stories to the little children told. So the people flocked to westward. 49ers they were called. Hardships, death were met by many, by great dangers ne'er appalled. Then in 1850, Texas people do decide that the capital at Austin shall for 20 years abide. And the boundary is settled by Pierce's boundary bill, giving $10 million Texas treasury to fill. But $5 million must be left with the United States to pay the bonds that Texas owed. This caused some hot debates. But in a special session, the legislature met and accepted this good offer to free the state from debt. Governor Bell was reelected, 1851. For lieutenant governor, people voted for Henderson. Of the death of Henry Smith in the month of March this year, and of the death of Burleson, Texans all are sad to hear. Texas, free from pressing debts, with money at command, now began some great improvements and buildings long to stand. Then Governor Bell as senator to Congress is elected. Lieutenant Governor Henderson takes his place as expected. Next, Peace comes in as governor. Texas now asks for pay for keeping off the Indians on the frontier far away. So Congress votes to pay it. That settled it may be. The state also lends money. Texas from debt is free. This money makes all glad to hear. But before the land they take, every railroad company must 25 miles make. And Governor Peace gave favor to state education free, $2 million set aside, a permanent fund to be. In August 1856, 100,000 acres for each of 4 asylums were allowed by legislators. Some Negroes planning to revolt were punished most severely. The Mexicans were much to blame, so history tells it clearly. Against the Mexican teamsters the cart war now was waged. The Texans fiercely fought them when at their work engaged. The Texans, lawless, took their teams, killed horses, stole their goods, murdered the drivers, and destroyed their wagons in the woods. The minister from Mexico was very much offended and asked of the United States to have such treatment ended. And finally, militiamen the government does direct, with help of friendly citizens, the teamsters to protect. As Texas needed railroads, legislature took a hand, and for every mile of road built, gave 16 sections of land. In 1857, on the 30th of July, the honored statesman T.J. Rusk by his own hand did die. A party called Know Nothings gained followers while 'twas new, flourished a while but disappeared ere long from public view. Now Governor Runnels follows Peace, and strongly did oppose large grants of land to railroads. That it is wrong he knows. The railroad companies are too slow, their contracts they don't keep. The state has been too generous, no benefits to reap. The troubles with the Indians he thought to set aside by special reservations where they might all abide. But thoughtless white men did some wrong to people living near. The Indians are censured, unjustly held in fear. Because of all this trouble, the people make demands, so the government removes them to Washita River lands. During these years, some feeling quite bitter has been showing that soon into a civil war the people will see growing. His second term as senator, Sam Houston, now does close. He is elected governor, and secession does oppose. All through the land next Mexico, the people are in fear. The Mexicans cause terror whenever they come near. 400 of these Mexicans are by Cortina led, and they keep southwestern Texas in a constant state of dread. The United States then orders gallant Colonel R.E. Lee to drive this band from Texas, and he makes Cortina flee. When Lincoln is elected President of the United States, Texas promptly leaves the Union. Much excitement it creates. General Houston, brave old soldier, and State Secretary Cave, with Adjutant General Norton, never their concurrence gave. Never would they swear allegiance to Confederacy, then they were forced to leave their places, which were filled by other men. Edward Clark is now the governor. For war Texans all prepare. For the army and expenses they are proud to do their share. By November in the army of the new Confederacy, there are 15,000 Texans who are longing war to see. U.S. troops to them surrender, and the officers paroled, but the private soldiers given their full liberty, we're told. U.S. property is captured, their expenses it defrays. Northern citizens are ordered to be gone in 20 days, but the Northern squadron blockades Galveston and other ports. Some succeed in blockade running, on the coast are no good forts. Frank R. Lubbock guides the doings of the state for 2 years' space. Major Sibley's expedition to New Mexico takes place. Just at first he is successful, and the Union troops defeat, but the Texans have much trouble, so they finally retreat. In the month of bright October, 1862, the Federals took Galveston. It was not hard to do. Corpus Christi, Sabine City, also the Federals take, but the Confederates in return a fine recapture make. With 4 steamers changed to gunboats, General Magruder and his men capture a Union vessel and take Galveston again. All this year until September 1863. From great military actions, Texas luckily was free. Sabine Pass is well defended by Confederates 42. Daring Captain Richard Bowling showed what a few men could do. General Banks with men 400 made a very bold attack. Captain Dowling and his men very quickly drove them back. During this administration, Texas suffered some, 'tis true, but quite often, though in wartime, 'twas a prosperous wind that blew. General Houston died at Huntsville, July 1863. Death hushed all unkindly feeling, for he loved his Texas free. Pendleton Murrah now is made the governor of the state, and during these last years of war much trouble does await. After General Lee surrenders, other Southern forces yield. Texas soldiers not disbanded are the last in battlefield. For at Brazos Santiago the last shot of war was fired. Then the Federals retreated. Gladly all to peace retired. Texas, filled with heartsick soldiers, without money had no rest. Lawlessness becomes too common. In vain Murrah did his best. At last he goes despairing to Mexico to be free from all the useless worry and no more trouble see. Lieutenant Governor Stockdale was governor a short space when Governor Granger came in June and took the governor's place. President Johnson sends Hamilton for governor in July. To win Texas to the Union he faithfully does try. Then on February the 7th, 1866, a convention met on purpose a constitution new to fix. Texas laws were then amended so that they would all accord with the Union Constitution. Some thought this was rather hard. Throckmorton was chosen governor, 1866, in June. That it meant hard work and trouble he discovered pretty soon. For the President and Congress on the rules would not agree. Under military rule, Congress said the South should be. Now as military ruler, General Sheridan does require all to take the ironclad oath if an office they desire. So Throckmorton from his office is removed, and E. M. Peace at this time is made the governor. and he does his best to please. Now, in place of Sheridan, General Hancock takes command, and he makes the rules more easy, but this Congress would not stand. General Hancock is removed, and 2 conventions try to make a constitution that with orders will comply. But such bitterness of feeling was shown by everyone, it caused a great confusion, and nothing good was done. On September 30th, in 1869, Governor Peace discouraged, his office does resign. Now, without any governor, Texas is left alone. The duties of executive by an adjutant are done. In November, all the people for a constitution vote, and by military orders elect officers of note. 13th, 14th, 15th amendments they must ratify before Texas legally Union laws could satisfy. So in 1870, these amendments are submitted. On March 30th, our Texas as a state is readmitted. E.J. Davis is the governor, military rule withdrawn. Ironclad oath no more required, brighter days begin to dawn. Some were much opposed to Davis by the Union power installed. Though he had lived long in Texas, he was a carpetbagger called. A good homestead law is passed, granting to each married man 160 acres to use as best he can. And for a man not married, 80 acres is the share. With no family to work for, this surely seems quite fair. Railroads now are being built. Immigrants are coming in. A period of prosperity for Texas does begin. People voted in December 1893 for Richard Coke or Davis, their governor to be. Coke wins by 50,000, but Davis holds his own until on January 15th the true results are shown. On the 13th of January, the Capitol at night is occupied by Coke upstairs. Davis below would fight. Luckily, no blood is shed. Davis quietly retires. The 19th of January, that is what the state desires. In 1875, the Texans do advise to have their constitution changed to one that is more wise. At Austin on September 6th, they're met with the intention of improving all the laws, a constitutional convention. For 2 months and 1/2 they worked till satisfied. Now we have this constitution by the people ratified. At the same time, Coke and Hubbard, for using much good sense, were wisely re-elected by a majority immense. The United States gave Texas land scrip to found a college, and agricultural and mechanics to give the people knowledge. In 1876, October 4th 'twas done, and eagerly the study of science was begun. Coke is elected senator, so Hubbard takes the chair. As governor of Texas, well does he work prepare. About the penitentiary, complaints had long been made. Hubbard now gave the state control, and much improvement made. The robbers on the frontier the laws had set at naught, but many now were captured and soon to justice brought. Land forgeries were practiced, men of high reputation were put in prison for this crime. 'Twas better for the nation. Texas affairs now prospered well, her debts became much less, and many immigrants were brought by Hubbard's wise address. Roberts is the next governor, his rule pay as you go. He reduced the state's expenses and made the taxes low. Plans for public education, Governor Roberts did command. Prairie View Normal founded for Negroes to attend. In 1879, Sam Houston Institute was opened for white teachers, its great worth none dispute. Other school matters now receive the governor's best attention. All he accomplished in this line we have not space to mention. The yellow fever quarantine is wise as time reveals. A new court is established called Commission of Appeals. On the 9th day of November, 1881, the Capitol at Austin burned. None know how it was done. John Ireland next is governor. He stands for education, and many things are done for schools in his administration. In 1883, at Austin as 'twas planned, the university was built, an honor to the land. Improvements of asylums the governor recommends. To needs of the afflicted the legislature now attends. Fence cutters were annoying many settlers here and there. The governor soon stops them. Such deeds no more they dare. Who is owner of Greer County, Texas or United States? And the question a commission with much care investigates. But the question is not settled till in 1896. By deciding against Texas, Cleveland does the boundary fix. L.S. Ross as governor saw the defeat of Prohibition and a lasting drought that left Texas in poor condition. The new Capitol is finished in May 1888, a magnificent grand structure, the glory of the state, second only to the Capitol at Washington we know, the seventh largest building in the world Texas can show. $1 million Texas gets to help keep good order. 'Twas paid by the United States for trouble on the border. Papers and people praised the state, railroads excursions giving, brought many worthy families who found here pleasant living. Boys to the reformatory at Gatesville now do go. Southwest Asylum for Insane is at San Antonio. At Corsicana, too, the state an orphan asylum made. In every way good works progress, just laws are now obeyed. From 1891 to 1895, while James S. Hogg is governor, new bills do surely thrive. The separate coach bill was passed, and interest and taxes were both made less against all crime. No effort Hogg relaxes. The sugar bounty is refused, for it is thought quite wrong, but money spent at Galveston will help the world along. The 22nd legislature established a commission to regulate the railroad rates and make the right condition. That roads should not discriminate against persons nor against places, for unfair treatment by the roads their management disgraces. And John H. Reagan, senator, for chairman Hogg selects, so Reagan leaves the Senate and duty ne'er rejects. Then Horace Chilton Hogg appoints John Reagan's place to fill, until the legislature meets and chooses whom it will. The Alien Land Law now is passed, Gesture Amendment 2, Confederate home established to Southern soldiers due. The Democratic Party is divided in convention, but Hogg is re-elected, so more events we mention. A part of Cox's army causes Texans some alarm. Railroads take them from the country before they do much harm. The stock and bond law now is made, and Board of Pardons created. Over the splendid Austin Dam, the city is elated. Roger Q. Mills now fills the place that Reagan had resigned. These men deserve these honors, no truer men we find. From 1893 to 1894, some find hard times in Texas, but good times are in store. Now the next governor we name is Charles A. Culberson. It made the state expenses less and many things relieved. In 1898, when there was war with Spain, Texas responded willingly and did much honor gain. During these administrations, Texas statesmen tried and true. 2 ex-senators, Koch and Maxey, 3 ex-governors have died. Next, J.D. Sayers is governor. With energy and zeal, he guides the work of government with power all can feel. The legislature in this time, as everyone expects, Charles Culberson and Bailey as senators selects. Over the Brazos Valley in 1899, a flood swept, leaving death and loss of great crops in its line. So Governor Sayers asked for funds to help in this distress. Several $100,000 made the ruin seem much less. Also a great calamity, the Austin Dam befell, and 1900 washed away, just how no one could tell. But worst of all, at Galveston, on 2 dark September days, 8th and 9th, a hurricane swept terrific from the bays. 'Twas an awful, awful windstorm, 120 miles an hour, washing waves from gulf and bay o'er the city in its power. Houses torn up by the thousands, thousands too of lives were lost. In the dark by winds and waters, people were like feathers tossed. And at last, on Sunday morning, when the sun shone bright and clear, o'er the scene of desolation, never was a sight so drear. Help and hope that could be offered, all the world did then bestow. Comforts from all states and countries to the stricken city flow. $1.5 million, large supplies the people send. Governor Sayers' distribution, people everywhere commend. Crops were good in 1900. Farmers then paid off their debts, and the next year came McKinley, on a visit none forgets. That year people were excited, for at Beaumont oil was found. Many wells were brought in quickly, oil and money did abound. Legislature 27th, as well as Governor Sayers, will recognize the need of art in all the world's affairs. The statue of Sam Houston by Elizabeth Ney's own hand, and one of S.F. Austin, are placed by their command in the Capitol at Austin, that the state may always show how much of love and honor to these men the people owe. Daughters of the Republic have all agreed to pay for 2 more statues of these men at Washington to stay in the Hall of Statuary. They feel that it is right these men should be thus honored in all the nation's sight. Libraries over all the state now number 84. With Andrew Carnegie's good help, there'll soon be many more. At Denton is established a girls' industrial college, and thus is made quite popular, useful housekeeping knowledge. A normal at San Marcos and one at Denton founded show how the Texas teachers in wisdom must be grounded. During these years the hand of death claims men of honored name. Their loss is mourned, but Texas feels the blessing of their fame. Attorney General Tom Smith and Dr. Burleson, ex-Governor R.B. Hubbard, Judge D.B. Culberson, Colonel Guy M. Bryan, Colonel Bello are a few of some of the illustrious ones that death took from our view. The people of wrecked Galveston from ruin rose more brave. For their loved city they made plans from future storms to save. A massive seawall they have built, the city they've made higher, and now it stands as fair and safe as any could desire. On January 20th, in 1903, Lanham becomes the governor. Fair prospects Texans see to help to raise the city of Galveston and save it from destruction by the storms of rushing wind and wave. Galveston County taxes due to the states were ceded for 15 years to Galveston to use as they were needed. Of occupation taxes 3/4 of the state bestowed, and of poll taxes all besides those to the school fund owed. And now our seaport city above the bay stands high, fearing no danger under a dark or cloudless sky. Then the child labor law was passed in 1903, for children under 12 years old in factories should not be. And there was much improvement made in schools and education. San Marcos Normal School was given with Huntsville equal station. The public school age too was changed to 7 instead of 8, and other bills were passed to help school progress in the state. An epileptic colony in 1904 opened in March at Abilene, the helpless to restore. To the insane asylum at Austin they contrive a Pasteur Institute to join in 1905. And here are treated people by rabid creatures bitten. Many are cured who else might be with hydrophobia smitten. The church part of the Alamo in 1883 was purchased for state property, as it was right to be. Daughters of the Republic of Texas never tired in working to persuade the state that all should be acquired. And so in 1905 the legislature makes appropriations that will pay for all the cost it takes. $65,000 buys the buildings for the state. This purchase of the Alamo with joy we celebrate. Across the Texas prairies, over the Texas hills, the iron horse speeds on its way, the air with rumbling thrills. 1,600 miles of railroad in this administration were built and helped the state grow strong and honor to the nation. And when, in 1906, the year drew to an end, more than 12,500 miles the railroads did extend o'er many miles of Texas. Rich lands quite useless lie, no verdure there can flourish under a rainless sky. Therefore, to make the country thrive, a bill was passed permitting people to levy taxes for irrigation fitting. In April 1905, our President Roosevelt came to see the Texas people and country of wide fame. He truly said while on this trip of pleasure that he'd found the place where men with honest hearts and nature's gifts abound. To regulate elections and make the voting true, Terrell election law was passed, and great good it will do. The university has grown in these years great and strong. Thousands of earnest students its halls of learning throng. Now Colquitt, Campbell, Brooks, and Bell the governor's place would try, when sure in 1906 election time comes by. And from these four men good and true, whom no delusions trammel, the people choose for governor Honorable T. M. Campbell. On January the 15th in 1907, he takes the oath of office, as in the law 'tis given. A.B. Davidson the place lieutenant governor takes, a wise, efficient officer in every way he makes. Among reforms and measures enacted into laws in this administration are some that have no flaws. Tax laws that make assessment of taxes just and fair for men or corporations to pay their rightful share. The law of nepotism says where public work is wished, from employment of their kinsfolks, all officials must desist. The free pass law declaring telegraph and telephone or railroad companies shall pass their employees alone. To carry on the country schools for 6 months in the year, school tax is raised to 20 cents on each $100 clear. And where 3,000 children of school age are enrolled, there shall be a superintendent, the school work to uphold. Daughters of the Republic for San Jacinto plead with the 30th legislature, and well do they succeed, for it makes appropriations to buy this battlefield, and make of it a public park, and not to strangers yield. Soldiers of San Jacinto, the Texas veterans bold, have met for years to keep in mind those stirring days of old. But death has called them one by one, on earth they meet no more. Sometime, somewhere, again they'll greet each comrade as of yore. November brings election day in 1908. The people choose their officers for the nation and the state. Voters of the United States for president consign William H. Taft to be the man in 1909. Campbell is reelected and Davidson as well. Perhaps to other candidates some better fate befell. The school amendment, too, was won to help the country schools by levying tax of 50 cents, if so the district rules. And so this time the people lost on statewide prohibition. It won't be long before they'll win. 'Twill be a grand condition. The time to vote for officers has quickly come again, and candidates are numerous in 1910. Davidson, Judge Poindexter, Colquitt, Cone Johnson, too, all honestly would like the work of governor to do. To meet the country's great demand, the legislature founds another normal in the West in Canyon City's bounds. And schools for agriculture, too, throughout the state are started, where knowledge of good farming to young folks is imparted. Now, as we look over Texas, our well-beloved state, the past looks bright with blessings, and future more await. In wealth and education, in manhood strong and pure, the state will have foundations that ever shall endure. Let those who now are boys and girls their duties well fulfill, and make the light of wisdom shine o'er valley, plain, and hill. Let truth and justice rule the state, make education free. Then high upon the roll of fame the Texas name shall be. The end.